this is an industry that will have to change. Bigger issues, bigger mergers will have to occur.
It's got to change.
Colonel Wages, maybe. These background industries, these side street industries, which there are two, you look at the car park outside, there are two people that can pretend to the golf club, the middle class. The managers, the play end, the pottery end, these are men that are glad to get £15 a week regular. Very glad. Now, further south, in Coventry, this would be a poor, it'd be a damn poor wage. This black glittering out place. That bread is tap rooms and bread is card players and bread is pontoon players and bread is all this. And it comes through. The sun on the potteries, the damned old clouds hanging over there, in the rain, the glittering rain, in your youth and in your days, all the days of every one of yours life. It's pressed back into every blink, every little, what do they call them? Pores. Every pore of your moment. There they are. This old background.
Now, Burslem is a small town, not much bigger than 2 football pitches. And I was always taken by drink. And I think, in a way, you can only really get to Burslem. It's no use getting through it through manufacturers or shopkeepers or these damn things. You'll only get to Burslem through the public houses. That's where the working class of Burslem, and it's a totally working class town. The other people, they may give some talk about it, the felons, the gentlemen, but they don't live in Burslem. You've got to live in Burslem, in those streets, to understand and know what kind of a world it is. And in the 50s, when I was there, and I was born not far away, but in the 50s, in the public houses, if I should tell you the list of public houses, there was a Star, there was an Old Crown, there was a Queen's, there was a King's, there was a Duke, there was a Marquis, there was a White Swan, there was a mitre, there was a millstone, there was a huntsman, there was a stag, there was a sea lion, there was a black lion, there was a red lion, there was a rose and shamrock and the thistle, there was an Albion, there was a Mason's Arms, there was a blue bell, there was a Durham ox, there was a foaming quart, there was a vine, there was a railway, there was a hole in the wall, there was a roebuck, there was an old vaults and new vaults, there was a brewery, there was an American, and last but not least, there was a jig post. There were 3 big cinemas, there was a billiard hall, there were dance halls, the whole place, no place in England, no place in Europe in the size of 2 football pitches had got more. It was the best drinking town in England, bar none. I would go as far as say as in Europe. How the hell they all kept going, I don't, but they did. Down every little corridor in the public houses, in the smoke rooms, the back rooms, the snugs, they were all busy or going, people scraping whatever money got. There was a dolphin too. Oh, good God. And I haven't finished there. There'd be more than that. You would wonder how they got them all in. No, certainly no place, no town I've ever known with so many in such a short place. It was a labyrinth of public houses and bars. There was a brewery, there was a bottling factory, there was a meat market, there were 2 town halls. You get that in a small town. You can't match it. And all that was filled with life. All that was filled with colliers and bloody potters and labourers in white aprons and pot wenches covered in white dust and chimneys belching and the smell of aniseed and horse muck. What a town, what a place it was to be. You could, if you'd gone to Paris or Barcelona for a young artist, it couldn't have been more than that. That was a tremendous background. It had got a sky at night that turned to carmine from the great furnaces. It had got pitmen and colliers. It had got great pit and the Sneed tip. It with a Belgian. The Belgian was the dirt disposal machine at the top. It had got all sorts. It had got a ship in at the back of the great tip. How can I say more than that? That's what it was to live among that. It had got a reading room where all the wrecks. It had got Vincent Riley. It had got Walsh, his mate. It had, oh God Almighty! It had got all the drinkers, all the meths. Down by the brick kilns, they slept at night. It was like a Goya, like Goya's inside against those furnaces at night, with the derelict sleeping. All that it had got, and I was a young teacher there, scraping along on whatever few hours of teaching I could get a week.
All the students that were around him, they loved him. The boys and girls there, they all enjoyed being with him, because they never knew what he was going to do. He used to do these things when he'd come into the room, and he'd get his leg and put one leg on the floor and the other one on the table and pick himself up on the table and walk around the damn things. You'd never believe what he did. I mean, I think he enjoyed it. He was like, he was like a child himself. But, he was doing it for a reason in his mind, and at the same time he was doing some very, very good paintings.
And I can see him now. He'd use crayons, and the crayons were the kind that you'd buy for your child, wax crayons. And he'd do it more often than not on board, and he'd put a piece of board up, and I remember he worked so vigorously it used to flirt off the ears, and he'd bend down, bang it, put it back on, and so vigorously with these. And I think he liked the crayon because it was immediate, and he didn't have to fiddle about too much mixing oil paints. It was direct and immediate, and I think that's why he used it so much.
He was a huge figure in the art school that I went to, and I always admired his power of observation and his lyricism. This all went very well with what I wanted to do as an artist.
Being a man much among company, and yet at the same time a pretty isolated, not an isolate is still a private man, funnily private man, yes, an inside man, even though a man much given to attending upon public houses and enjoying the company of other men, a private man among them. Well, that's a sort of man, a trilby, half ire, half booze. It's always these mouths and teeth, and the head's like something that might have been drawn by a kid on a wall. It's just a little bit more than something that might have been drawn. The wall and the head and the drawings on wall and the head are not much dissimilar. It's no attempt at reality. It's like something that's part made of brick, part made of flesh, part made of drawing. There's some balance between the things. A drawing like that, for instance, how many men I've seen that, had the teeth out and have never troubled to have any more, and are sunken there, and, the mouth is made for smoking a fag end.
Who's in there?
One more.
Charlie, I want two. Wait a second.
It may be, that it somehow seems to me that teeth and mouths are where the appetite was. Mouths are where the drink went in. Mouths are where the smoke was smoked. Mouths are where whatever kisses were made, and even that was a long time ago. And whatever teeth had been fitted up with or left, all these things are there. And mouths, I've always been interested in mouths, and sometimes I don't know whether they're snarling or smiling. I do think of the impact, the possible impact on a possible spectator. Of course I do. I believe art is a matter of, it's what I arouse in you, almost not what I get out of me. And that's what I would think. But much more than anything I know, this is perhaps what I believe in. It is that the people
the people I'm drawing, I would want to find a way that they would have seemed to have drawn themselves. I wouldn't want to be, if Rubens had been drawing, he would drawing courtiers. The manner and the nature of his line would be a courtier's line. If Michelangelo was drawing, he would draw like a god. But if I am drawing, these men are not gods. They wouldn't know Michelangelo from the ice cream man. They wouldn't know Rembrandt from a racehorse. But you see, I've got to get inside them and make it that kind of flash. If they are Flash Jacks from the street, Flash Harrys, I've got to make it like a Flash Harry's drawing. If they are, an old mumbler from the street, I've got to make it like an old mumbler. If it's a nut, I've got to try to make it like a nut. I've got to come from inside out all the time. It's not me outside drawing these. I wanted more and more to get in and to be inside, making it from an outsider, an empathy, a sensual empathy with the nature of the subject. This is, of course, my journey into this has been that one. From being a student to being this. This is a sort of journey. This is why I must know my subjects. I must over-know them. I must know them, be with them. Not separate, not the man that goes and looks at them. I must live with it all around me. It's the only thing I can really do that.
I had somehow in my life taken this idea to root, and it had rooted in my mind, that I should only draw what I knew. What I knew physically, what I knew emotionally. If I knew that world, I should draw that world. And I used to draw and paint that world. But what I didn't know was that world was rapidly disappearing. The industrial world, the world of heavy industry, and the kind of human beings, the kind of stoicism, the kind of shapes that had come from these people, from the mean streets, from the backs, from the very hands that had been fashioned by the work they did, from the coal or the pot or the clay. These things were going. I have always been drawn to that which is poor, the richness of poverty, the grain of poverty.
He was a looker. He was always looking at things, looking at and listening. So when we see the picture of the dirty joke, one can not only hear that there's a joke going on, one can also feel the sounds of the pub and all the clatter and inside that small smoke room that Arthur almost took for his own. He understands these people, he's sympathetic towards them, he knows their foibles and their weaknesses and their strengths. He was a good listener to people's conversation, their inflection, their change of voice, their mannerisms. He almost fed off it. He was able to use all this stuff, whether in his writings, his poetry, or his painting.
I could see it pictorially everywhere. I could see they made pictures. The way in which the town hall, the old town hall, is like a Peking. When you come up Newcastle Street, it looks like a building in Peking. It's a massive, heavy block of a building. I should think a powerful Victorian building. When you think that in the Victorian time of fair poverty and difficulty, that town had enough vitality to put the building up like that. God, we couldn't do that now. And then some brains, they decided to knock the meat market down. They knocked the meat market down and made one or two lawns. Very fond of grass they are. Made one or two lawns there. And the man that knocked the meat market down should have a ball and chain attached to his leg for the rest of his bloody life.
Well, there's always been that transient quality about Arthur's paintings, but also he's caged in. If you look at some of the figures walking down the road, they look as if they're caged in. You can see the lines behind the paintings. There's always lines going that way or that way. Maybe we're all trapped.
7 or 8 years ago. I draw and paint, and suddenly I thought, all these people that I draw and paint, they speak and they think and they make noises and they live and move, and I thought that writing poetry, writing plays was another dimension for these human beings. It is out of the potteries. It is the potteries that I've lived in. It's my sediment, the sludge inside my nature, whatever richness there is in my blood is out of this place. But I think that perhaps it's particular to here, but I hope to make it. I hope it's a even deeper thing than that, a richer thing than that. But it is about this place. It is particular. It is particular to this place in that way.
Of course, nothing you've written could be more particular than the scrapyard.
An acrid wind blows through this wilderness of bits, this Golgotha of dead vehicles, their reared-up bodies frozen stiff in their last agonies. Here the trees have trunks of wet iron and leaves of matted wire. The grass is filled with iron spikes, and what flowers there are withered in their sockets. In the yellow water close by, a can floats through a skin of oil, seeping out from the poisoned land. All the birds here have clockwork voices and beaks sharp as rusted razors. All the men here have eyes filled with the venom of small steel rings. The sun here is a bland eye of glass that floats through clouds of sulphur gas. They are gone. They are gone. Percy Clegg and Uncle Tom. Where is the blind man and his dog? Him that cleared the drains out with his clog? Where is the drunken ex-town clerk, the little man who wouldn't work? Where is the wild-eyed window cleaner who lived rough, the old woman who took snuff? Where is the vast fat man with a painted tie, him that had a monocle in his eye? I remember one night in the smoke room he sold us a little glass swan. God knows where he got them from. I wonder what happened to Shanghai Lil. You would have thought she would have been too tough to kill. Where are the angel, the black swan, and the pull-down star? They are gone, they are gone. Even such as these are gone.
So the first play that emerged was in 1976, and it was called The Spanish Dancer from Pinnock Street. And if you can imagine, a picture, a very common picture that somebody might have on the wall at home or in a shop or something, of a Spanish dancer, an exotic picture. And Arthur wrote this play about a man called Edgar Barnish, who lived a very humble life in the back kitchen with his mum, went to work every day, but in his spare time loved to paint. And he copied paintings, and he copied very, very carefully and with energy and commitment and care a Spanish dancer. And he enters his finished painting for an art competition. And it's the story of whether that achieves anything.
The first time I met Arthur was actually my second job at the Vic. I managed to get the place I wanted to go and work at, and then fortunately they were doing a play where my accent was quite useful. So that's when I first met Arthur, and that was Spanish Dancer at Pinnock Street. It was about this ordinary working class bloke who was interested in art, and his mate was a lorry driver, and it was like the two sides of the same coin. The guy who wanted to understand art, but, had no training, culturally, there was, where would he have learnt it? And his mate, who was a lorry driver, he wasn't interested at all. So I just remember they were looking at a picture of the rape of the Sabine women. And he says, "What's this then?" He says, "The rape of the Sabine women?" He said, no, it's Sabine, as in Woodbine.
You've also written the libretto for an opera.
Yes, I wrote
a play which we're turning into a rude ballad opera called Dr. Fergo's Last Passion. He is Dr. Fergo, a famous wart doctor that had made love potions and all kinds of the mechanics of love he attended to pretty well, did Fergo. He used to practice in the cockloft in Hanley among the pups and the hens and that kind of thing, you know, worming pups and biting pups' tails on one minute, and he was curing impotence on the other. All these things were mixed up together, much often with the same stuff, often with the same lotion.
And this is going to be presented at the Victoria Theatre?
Yes, shortly this is to be put on at the Victoria Theatre.
And Peter says, I was looking for as many opportunities for the apparatus of opera as possible. Duets, quartets, arias and recitatives. And for Arthur, Peter says, I believe it was a delicious procession of vivid tableaux in his imagination. For example, Dr. Fergo staring up the nostrils of Dennis Birtles in order to diagnose the Tunstall nose mite.
The Tunstall nose mite is very hard to diagnose. As to catch a glimpse of it, you've got to look up somebody's nose. And his nostrils are so narrow and often dark as night, it's easy for this dreadful nose mite to keep out of sight. Some authorities deny its existence. The Lancet doesn't want to know. But I think they're probably jealous of my international fame for giving this dreadful nose mite its rather curious name. But I thought it rather appropriate, as Tunstall's where it grows, and that's where I diagnosed it, up a Tunstall nose. I mean, after all, Lars has got a fever, and Doulally's got the tap, and Germany's got the measles, and France has got the clap, and China's got the red flu, and St. Vitus has got the dance. Surely a place like Tunstall should be given its chance to figure in medical dictionaries, and a chance to bring fame on both Tunstall and the nose mite by joining up their names.
Well, I've always wanted to do an opera, I suppose, and I've always been looking for a play that could turn into an opera. So when Arthur Berry sent me this play that I knew he'd been working on, I thought, we'll make this into an opera. It'll be more true to itself, because Arthur's method of writing is rather like many of his paintings. There's a larger-than-life element, and I thought that if we actually turned it into an opera, it would realise that and make it more funny, and I think it probably will.
It's a rude opera. How rude is it?
Well, this isn't London or Birmingham or Manchester. You know, people are still kind of well-mannered and discreet here, and there's certain things that you can do in those places that you can't do in North Staffordshire. So, you know, it's got many references to many fundamental things, but we try to be careful about how we mention them. But it is rude.
Dr. Fergo's Last Passion is a kind of grand opera, but a sort of grand pub opera, set in the seedy surgery of Dr. Fergo. But it's about his fatal passion for a beautiful widow who has a row of houses.
Arnold Bennett, Stanley Matthews, Josiah Wedgwood, each in his own way brought fame and glory to the pit mounds, pot banks and gas holders that landscape the 6 towns of the Potteries. Local legend in these parts makes mention of another, a Dr. Fergo, sometimes referred to as the Rasputin of the Potteries, who practiced his arts in the cockloft at Hanley. Some people, though, claim that Fergo exists only in the mind of Arthur Berry, the Potteries' own poet laureate. It was to Mr. Berry that I put the question, Fergo, fact or fiction?
Dr. Fergo is both. Dr. Fergo does not exist in the past or in the present. He exists in a kind of sideways time. He's a mythical figure that sometimes sits on the top of a pit tip like a Mount Olympus, and his Homburg hat sticks out of the top of a cloud of polluted gas. Dr. Fergo is, neither man nor God. He's a bit of both.
What were his particular talents?
His talents were very various. His talents had to do with he could make hope where there was only hopelessness. He could make love sprout where there was no love, and many a potwench would give evidence to that.
At Stoke's Victoria Theatre, the man who brought joy to the potwenches is to be immortalised next week in the ballad opera Dr. Furgo's Last Passion.
In my play, this famous Dr. Furgo has fallen in love. He has fallen in passionate love with the landlady from the Sea Lion, a widow called Mrs. Florence P. Alcock. He's fallen passionately in love with her, but he finds that dear lady, has fallen in love with her own pianist, a Mr. Montgomery Spruce, a man filled with TB. Spruce happily and strangely comes to consult Dr. Furgo on a private matter, a matter of impotence. He cannot satisfy the said Mrs. Florence P. Alcock, a woman of very passionate needs. And coming unknowingly to Dr. Furgo, he lays his condition into Dr. Furgo's hands. And Dr. Furgo, of course, immediately is put into such a position that can give him the dose of the knockoff drop, the famous and powerful knockoff drop.
And this fellow Klondike, what is he?
Klondike is he is a throwback, a genetic throwback to some more primal time. He's a kind of manservant to Dr. Furgo. Dr. Furgo saved him from institutional life, and he follows Dr. Furgo mumbling angrily and waving an axe at children in the backs, all sorts of things of that kind. He collects rubbish, he collects edible fungi and hernia trusses and false teeth, all sorts of things like that for Dr. Furgo's surgical department.
Yeah, all these characters, you know, I say like Klondike, like Dr. Furgo and Sissy Thirkettle and the wonderful, wonderful Dulcie Potts. You know, what the way he would talk so affectionately about someone like Dulcie. And that was the thing with Arthur. Utterly and totally non-judgmental. He didn't say this was a good person or a bad person, because the way they behaved. Dulcie Potts was Dr. Furgo's receptionist by day and some sort of exotic dancer by night. And you know, that was who she was.
The good doctor has employed many receptionists in his time, but this receptionist is one called Dulcie Potts. She is a shapely creature, a kind of glandular mammal, a creature who dances naked, or 3 parts naked in a local nightclub, in a cage at a local nightclub. She's a go-go dancer at night and a receptionist in the day, a most sensual creature.
What Arthur did was he just started to talk about Dulcie Potts, the character, and he would say things that were in the script, but he was also just tell me about her and her back. He was giving me his background to Dulcie, which I hadn't really fully grasped in the rehearsal period, and he said things like, her underwear is not too great, you know, it's not too rosy, it's not too clean, but what she does is she lathers on the perfume to cover it up. And I suddenly saw her in all her ghastliness, really, this woman who had aspirations to being a member of the, you know, the starstruck. She was starstruck, and it was everything she aspired to, all this glamour. I like Kleenex tissues, I like motor cars, I like the smell of perfume in sophisticated bars. And she went into these sophisticated bars with all her cheap, nasty perfume and her, you know, unwashed underwear, and this is what she wanted to become. And Klondike would come out with and it was just. Oh, that she hated him.
I've had enough opportunity, a golden opportunity to marry the rich widow of my dreams. And you blundering idiot, you stupid blundering idiot, have messed it up and ruined all my schemes. I could just see myself as a man of property, with a rich buxom widow sitting on my knee, and a glass of whiskey in my hand. What a picture of happiness, what bliss! And now that picture smashed into smithereens, just another of my broken dreams.
Oh, what a shame! What a shame! You'll never be the same man again.
Here I am, an honest man, trying to make a living as best I can. An honest man, what I am, an honest man, living as best I can. But every letter I get through the door is doing its best to keep me poor. There's none of it plain, there's none of it clear. Dear sir, only not so dear.
And Dr. Fergo's Last Passion began its triumphant 5 weeks in the Vic repertoire in 1979 with Jim Wiggins creating the definitive Doctor. And it had a lot of publicity, and a lot of people came to see it, including the formidable literary agent Margaret Ramsay. And Peter remembers this and has written this. That formidable literary agent, Margaret Ramsay, came to see Arthur's first pub opera, Dr. Fergo's Last Passion. She said Dr. Fergo was a work of genius, too bloody good to be performed in the West End. And of course, it wasn't ever done there.
Most of the plays I worked on, I was perhaps doing incidental music, and there'd be, although Peter sometimes treated the incidental music as rather like film music, as background to the action, so there was quite a lot of incidental music in some of his productions. But this had lots and lots more songs, a big musical content, so we had to work very hard. And of course, the actors in those days weren't always musical and singers. I mean, nowadays in the theatre, actors are expected to do everything, aren't they? They have to dance, they have to sing, it's the norm. But back in those days, it wasn't always the case, and some of them were not very good singers at all, and we had to work and they did work hard, and the production as a result was quite vibrant, you know, because they brought that freshness to it, and they liked the operatic bits and the continuous flow of the music. He was a joy to work with, but he was great fun. Not because you were always working, because he used to go off into these side alleys. He was a great raconteur, and whatever you're doing would remind him of something. He claimed not to be musical, so his lyrics, what he used to do, they scanned fairly well. I had to adjust them here and there, but generally his lyrics scanned, because he would have a tune in his head, some music hall tune or old pop song, and he would write the lyrics to that song. I didn't want him to tell me what the song was ever, so he kept that to himself usually, but that's so in a way his lyrics were quite well shaped, because he was following an established pattern that someone had set with the song he was using as a basis. I remember we did one lyric for a song for Quiet Please, his play about the library and the closure of the reading room. And he was talking about the local social security offices, and he said, in the corridors of the powerless, which is a reference to C.P. Snow's novels, where the pencils hang on strings. And it doesn't happen nowadays, but in those days, the pencil was always tied on a string so people couldn't pinch it when they were filling forms in. And he put this in the corridors of the powerless, where the pencils hang on strings, and it just said everything that he was trying to say.
Oh, he's a man of principle, of
Well, in that time there were all kinds of human wreckages on the streets, men and women twisted by fortune, twisted by dreadful physical circumstance, and who used to go into the reading room and they'd sit and fall round the tables, and some of them would sleep in there, and perhaps they'd stink in there against the hot pipes. And I remember seeing one man there. I called him the poor man's lawyer. His head one afternoon was lying upon the Tatler magazine, and I saw some young lady from the Shires photograph, and I saw the poor man's lawyer, grizzled face, lying on it. And the whole social bloody document was in that. The reading room was a great place. I sat in among these people with. I was absorbing it. It was rich stuff, very rich stuff. As I once had to take a library book back on which, for some reason, I'd squashed an egg. And I tried to put it through, and the librarian caught me and opened it, and there was this bloody egg squashed between these two pages. And I felt, "What's this, Mr. Berry?" I said, "There's been an accident. It seems as though there has." Anyway. It was booked by Sigmund Freud and all, God help him.
The wonderful thing about having Arthur in the place was that the designers had a chance to work with a very talented painter and simply interpreting the world of Arthur's drawings onto the stage and in the costumes. And that's how we did it. I mean, almost asking Arthur to design the set and the costumes.
What you got first was a picture. His base really was visually stimulated. It was what these people looked like.
The one beautiful thing about working with Arthur was that he would make character sketches of every character you were playing in any of his plays, and this is his character sketch of Mr. Clapcott. So that was put up on the dressing room wall, right where we were sitting, so that we always had that in our heads. Every time we came into the dressing room, that's my character. So you knew how to dress, an idea of how he stood, possibly how he walked, and an air, a mannerism.
As soon as he started to talk about the characters, he became the characters. It wasn't a case of just sitting, this is what he was like. He became Albert Onions, whoever else the characters were, Fred, I think it was Fred Gutteridge. It just became the people. It was fantastic.
Saturday, 17th of January 1981, rehearsal recordings of Arthur Berry. For quiet, please. Albert Onions now with David Bowen.
Gary Michael here. There's no but trouble, nothing but trouble. Nothing but trouble.
Has he got a high voice then, Arthur?
No, it's more of a piping screech. Turn him out. Nah, then Gilbert. Gilbert. No, that's a bloody miserable faced old bugger, that's I'll tell you what they are. And I tell you the truth about it, they're jealous of him, they are. They love Mrs. Greenbatch. They're jealous of him, they are. No. He's a mischievous old bugger.
You learn so much from him, just watching. I've got to do that, remember. Watch that. Keep an idea on that little mannerism there. Of course, Arthur got his own. He never took his hat off, his flat cap. But once he started playing his characters, the cap would be moved around. He never took it off. He'd always move it, tilt it, one way or the other.
He'd get really animated and he'd be talking about things. And then he'd start banging the bottom of his... And then he'd turn his cap sideways. And he'd get really animated. If he turned his cap sideways, that's when you knew what he was on about.
There you go. And you can tell, now if that goes into the red, be careful, because it's getting into distort, and that's the one you just change for it.
Okie dokie. Tape for Peter Aker, character of Alf. Here's the caretaker a bite. I've come for Luke at table. My mate should have been with me, but he's had to go on another job, with 2 wagons off the road.
This is Sweet Bird of Card Street, and I think virtually every character has a poem, but a lot of them were cut. And that would be because of either time constraints, didn't quite fit, theme was too long, but probably time constraints.
And this one here, you know, very famous poem by Arthur. If there was a metre to measure pleasure, what reading would it give, I wonder? And that whole poem has been cut.
If there was a metre to measure pleasure, what reading would it give, I wonder? Would a bacon sandwich measure as high as the love light in your eye? Or a sherry trifle mean as much as kisses, or beef dripping? However could you hope to compete with that? Or pig's head brawn, for that matter? And vanilla ice cream would surely be the equal of love's young dream. Fresh garden peas just out of their pods are food, I think, fit for the gods. Your charms, I think, would stand a chance against 2 rounds of toast, or a pork pie, or a piece of cheese. Against pleasures such as these, you may be able to compete. Yes, I think your arms, your hair, your shapely thighs would stand a good chance against most pork pies. But I can't really be sure which I like the best. I wish I had a pleasure meter to put you to the test.
The Sweet Bird of Card Street is, of all the plays, the most near to Arthur's kind of true self.
An attempt by a young girl to escape from a way of life which there was no escape from.
Our sweet bird of Card Street has flown away. Her spirit left this street today. She always wanted to fly like a bird, and like a jeweled bird she flew. Not far, but much further than she knew.
The Reverend Ivan Cheekle, and he was in the play The Sweet Bird of Card Street. And what was happening at that time is there was a lot of demolition going on, which is, I think, still going on now, and they were knocking all the houses down. And he was the vicar. But he had this little, like a tin hut for his church, corrugated iron, and it had asbestos on the roof. He had a congregation of 6.
The bulldozers are waiting. Nothing but the street can slake the thirst of these monsters. Maul and whine, smash and drag out, their bright yellow hides gleam through the plaster dust. Only the thin blood of old soldiers fading away. Only the old women with a bag of empty bottles. My uncle's belt swings uneasily on the door. His thin wrist shakes when he holds his glass. For these are the ones the machines want. The houses tremble and crumble sideways, and another empire will soon be gone. From feathers to iron, from iron to rust, ashes to ashes, dust to dust.
Oh, sweet mystery of life, at last I found you. Now I know the secret of your life divine. La da dum diddle da do da do da do do da da do da.
Through the 1980s, the new Vic was being planned and coming to fruition, and there were a number of appeal events put on to raise funds. And Arthur was involved in 4 of these presentations, involved with musicians and actors, celebrating the lives of different painters.
How to paint a picture of Nile Street. To paint a picture of Nile Street, one would need a warped plywood board, some glue, a sack bag, some rusty screws, a basin full of pig's blood, a small bag of soot, some crushed cinders, a scrubbing brush, moonlight, bakelite, spit, a piece of stick, a pin, a comb for special effects, and a wet sponge.
all my plays are about Burslem, and this is part of the road, the main route that leads from Tunstall up into Burslem, and it leads into Burslem. It's just that road. It's called Scotia, and I use that road because Scotia seemed to have a broader meaning than just the potteries. I mean, there's Scotland Road in Liverpool, the Scotia Road in a lot of places.
Arthur's work was sort of Hieronymus Bosch meets Coronation Street, really. If you put Coronation Street into some kind of warped world, that's what it would be.
With anyone of genius and talent, which he was, I think that they pay for that gift in other ways. And I think what people don't realise or don't know about is that he was a very tortured individual. He was tortured by a lot of things. One was his lack of patience with things, and having one arm didn't help, although I've seen him tie a shoelace up so quickly with his one hand that you wouldn't notice. But he had very little patience with the ordinary everyday things, getting a dog lead on or opening a tin. He was always on the edge of temper with inanimate objects because he wasn't easy with them, and because of his lack of patience. And the other thing was a rather morbid streak, which I would say was a man who was filled with fear. And some of his paintings show that. They're paintings that no one's ever seen before. And he called them his terrible paintings. And they are. You wouldn't want to live with them. And I look at them and I think, how did he live with that much fear inside him? And I think basically the fear is that he is an ephemeral creature. He is mortal. He's aware of his mortality every moment of the day. He's afraid of illness, afraid of death, and even a click at the back of his neck could cause him to go into a great state of fear. He'd say, there it is again. It's happened again. And I'd say, well, it can't be anything very much you don't know. Yes, he was tormented in various ways like this.
For every painting of mine that survives, there must be 5 or 6 that don't survive. Every painting I have has paintings on the back or paintings underneath. I must have done thousands of paintings for the few hundreds that have survived. My paintings are mostly about familiar things, the world of the streets and houses that I grew up in. This world is both a prison and occasionally a paradise to me. I know it, or think I know it, from inside out. I know the names of all its ghosts, and when they all assemble and whisper to me, I am most at ease with myself. Homage to the oat cake. Let us pay homage to the oat cake, or oat cake, or wood cake, as the old men call them. The oat cake is not a cake at all, really, not like the fairy cake or the Eccles cake, not a cake in that way, more of a pottery's papadum, a sort of Tunstall tortilla, a clay Suzette, as flat and thin as a dishcloth, an obedient and suppliant cheek that will bend any way you want it, round and floppy. The oat cake has a texture similar to the skins of old colliers or men dying of potter's rot. These are not cakes made for every day, and should only be eaten twice or at the most 3 times a week, preferably at weekends when you are flush and filled with drink or the prospect of drink. Such richness every day would be too much, rather like having the news of the world delivered as a morning paper. There would surely be a drop in production and an explosion in the birth rate. No,
Oat cakes are best eaten at weekend, and all genuine oat cake shops are shut in the week, and their proprietors lie late to bed and spend the rest of the day watching horse racing on the telly. I have heard it said that small fortunes are made in this trade, and among the pottery's working class, when a child is born, there can be no higher hope for it than it would become the proprietor of a damn good oat cake and pikelet shop. The pikelet, you ask? What's that? It's a sort of female oat cake, smaller, thicker, sweeter, more immediately seductive, sometimes with currants in it. A muffin for the lumpen working class, best eaten soaked in butter or marge. If overindulged in, both these oat cakes can play the very devil with your waistline. I must warn, indulgence leads to bulgence.
Oh, sweet mystery of life, at last I found you. Now I know the secret of your life divine.